Here we go, everyone. I am super excited. We're doing a little behind the scenes podcast recording today with my guest, Susan Hyatt. I am super excited to have you here today. I have to tell you, Susan, I ran across your book at the perfect time. I can't wait to tell you all about it. But first of all, big welcome to having you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to hear about this perfect moment. That's
Yes.
typically how it happens.
I know, right? As an author, that has to feel so good too. But I ran across your book 3 months postpartum with my third little baby girl.
Oh,
And it was exactly what I needed. After having, two kids and then the third one, I was like, I need something that's like rejuvenating and makes
mm-hmm.
me feel good, not just another diet book, right? Because as I was
Oh,
like starting to think about getting back into the losing the mama weight, right? So
right.
I just wanted to let you know that I really needed that pep talk. And that was what your bear book did for me.
Oh, that makes me so happy because, right, like diet books are the opposite of, of joy bringers. And I have a funny story. I was just traveling, and yesterday I was in the Delta Lounge in Atlanta, and I had a 3 hour layover. And I had my earbuds in. I found a new series to watch to pass the time. I was so into this series. And I went and I was getting like their complimentary Chex Mix. And they had real, not packaged, but real Rice Krispie treats, which is one of my childhood favorites. So, talk about a pleasure eat, right? But they had them cut like really small. So I kept going back up to get more Rice Krispie treats. And the bartender said, "Are you Susan Hyatt?" And I turned around and I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "My wife and my sister and my mom are all in a book club and they're all reading your book, Bear."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh my God, that's so exciting." And he goes, "I can't wait to tell them you were going ham on these Rice Krispie treats." And I could not stop laughing. I said, "Listen, this is on brand for me because I'm not dieting and I am absolutely enjoying these Rice Krispie treats. Okay. So you go home and tell them."
I love it. I'm sure he did too.
Too, but I was like, "Listen, these streets are watching."
I love that. I
So
love that.
anyway, thank you for reading my book.
Yeah. And I tell us more about the book too. Tell us more about your bear method because it's different
Mhm.
than diet culture, diet books, and fill everyone in of why this was the perfect timing, for a new mom who didn't want to do the diet thing.
Well, because and for those of you watching who are like, "What are they talking about? Diet culture?" Diet culture is really a system that we live within, that we're raised on, girls and women, that our currency or our value revolves around how thin we can become. And of course, it's nonsense, but we are raised to believe this. And so by the time a woman is my age, I'm 49, she has dieted on average 30 years for 30 years of her life. And she's tried separately 60 plus different diets. And so when you're a new mom, what you need is energy. And what you need is to learn how to love the skin that you're in and how to take exceptional care of yourself from a place of love and to become devoted to your own pleasure. But that's not what we're taught. And so I think what's important about this book is that it's fun, and it breaks down 7 ways that you can come home to yourself. And so those things include learning how to move with love, learning how to eat with love, learning how to adorn yourself in ways that feel amazing for you, learning how to think, and learning how to make a scene, which is really have boundaries and advocate for yourself and others, and and how to create an environment for yourself that supports what you need to thrive. And so that, of course, is very different than diet books and diets in general and diet culture, which teaches us that we need to shrink ourselves instead of expanding our lives. And so it's a dramatic break from the way you and I were both raised.
Exactly. Yeah. And you go into so many different things too, not just what you eat and exercise, which are important, but like when I got to the closet chapter, I was like, I hate my closet, you know? And so for other people who might hate their closet too, like what would be some of your tips for like decluttering the closet, and why is that so important? Like we're all in a career change right now. All of our listeners are, trying to go into that next part of their life, make some sort of change. Why should they start with their closet?
Well, the closet detox chapter is always so interesting because my clients get excited, like, oh, we're going to declutter. And it seems so innocent. But what happens, and I would be curious what happened for you, is that women go into their closet and realize that there are lots of things happening. Usually, there's a variety of sizes, and we'll hold on to what I call ambition sizing. That little dress that you've never been able to fit into, or it's been years, but you taunt yourself with it as some kind of inspiration, but it's not. Or sizes that are multiple sizes larger than we are today because there's yo-yo dieting that was my life, and so I had basically every size jean, and I had all these clothes that were too small and all these clothes that were too big, and I couldn't ever. You probably hated your closet because you couldn't quickly put your hands on something that fit you right now and felt amazing when you put it on. Because the other thing that can happen is that we'll say, oh, I'll go shopping or I'll invest in great clothes when I lose that whatever, last 10 pounds or more. And so, what I challenge women to do is to get rid of anything that doesn't fit and only have things in the closet that energetically make you come alive. So it doesn't have to be couture. It can be from consignment shops. It can be, workout clothes. It can be lots of things. But what it shouldn't be is anything that isn't a reflection of who you are, and it doesn't, feel great to put on, because there's an energy to clothing. So when we're covering ourselves up with things that we don't like, that we just are like, ugh, like it's just something to put on, that affects how we show up in the world.
Exactly. And I think for me, it was just it's okay to get rid of it. Like, cause I feel
Yeah.
bad. I paid for this and, you put money into this. But I think that was what I remember most of, like, okay, this piece has had its time. It doesn't make me feel good anymore. It's time to let it go, and just having less. Like, it's okay. I have to have less in your closet too.
And it's okay if the tags are still on it, right? I had tons of things that now that's not the case, but I had to have compassion for myself that I was buying things up that were a great deal. I didn't really like them, they didn't fit well, whatever reason, they were a great deal. It's like, it's not a great deal if it's just hanging in your closet forever. Like, let someone else find joy from that. And you can have fewer things, but that when you open that closet, it's all gonna work for you.
Exactly. And you talked so much too about like infusing joy into your life. How does that help you make more money too? Like, why is that so important?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is, the more fun I have, the more money I make. And that's because when I started my career as a coach, so that was in 2007, that was not the case for me. Prior to starting this company, I was very much a like hustler, grind it out, borderline workaholic. And I knew that something had to change. And so when I started this company, I set out to prove that the more fun I had, the more money I would make. And I didn't necessarily believe it at the time. So for any of you watching or listening to this, if you're side eyeing me hard, like, just give it a shot. But I actually just right before getting on here with you recorded my own podcast episode about how to have the nerve to prioritize your joy and also access your joy, because it does. I mean, it just makes sense. So, for all of you who are in some kind of career change or career transition, you're probably changing and transitioning because whatever you were doing or are doing doesn't light you up, or isn't quite right for a variety of reasons. And so, just imagine what you get done and what you accomplish right now doing something that doesn't bring you joy, if you were throughout your day experiencing joy, how much more you could do. It just makes, in terms of not just productivity, but how much better you could feel and how much better care you could take of yourself. And when you have more energy because you're accessing and prioritizing your joy, everything just works better. So, and it can be little things. But here's the thing about joy is that it's different than happiness. Joy can ride shotgun to grief and any kind of mess you've got going on. So I can have things falling apart or crumbling, but joy is always available inside of us. And here's my favorite part about joy: it is unreasonable in the face of life. So you can experience amazing moments of joy, even as you're sitting with a dying parent, even as you're parenting a kid that doesn't want to listen, even while you're running a company that's very hectic. And so it's all about prioritizing you, which is again something that we're not taught to do as women.
Yeah, and it goes back to how you talk about detoxing your mind too, because all of this really is mindset. I just this morning woke up and was like, I have a lot to do today, but it's like changing your mindset to like, oh, there's a lot of fun things on my calendar. It's like we have a tendency to like think negatively, especially first thing in the morning too. Like how do you
Gosh.
detox your mind?
Well, listen, it's like you were eavesdropping on the podcast episode I just recorded because
Ooh.
because I talked about how I woke up this morning and our brains are going to brain, right? Our minds are going to uh start thinking of what has to be done that day
Yeah.
and like, oh, this and that. And so the thing with mindset is it's not the only piece that can change your life. But if you can get your mind working in conjunction with your body, the wisdom of the body, so much can happen. So mindset is just one piece, and it's only 5% of conscious thinking, right? So you can change your whole life with that 5%, but there's so much going on underneath the surface. When I wake up, I tend to, like this morning, notice what's going on in my mind and then how that feels in my body. And so
Mm.
I woke up this morning with like, I was making such a huge deal about these international bank wires I needed to make for an Italy retreat that I'm facilitating this later this week. And I was like, you're getting upset because you have to get online and do like a bank transfer that's probably going to take you 10 minutes, right? And you're going to Italy, stop it.
Italy.
Right? And so it's like if we can take a breath and say like, wow, okay, I get to record a podcast. I get to facilitate a retreat. I get the opportunity to try again at whatever it is that's bothering you. And something that Liz Gilbert said in the past couple of years, I don't know exactly how she said it, but she described when you wake up in the morning and your mind is racing and you start to feel anxious, that she calls that horizontal thinking, as opposed to like once you get up out of bed and get going, vertical thinking is so much better. And for me, that's really true. If I notice that I wake up with my mind racing, I'll think about, okay, how would I rather feel going through this day? And then what can I think that's aligned with that feeling state? And regardless, get up. Because I know if I get up and stop ruminating in bed,
Everything
I'm gonna
changes.
feel so much better. Like just get up, get your shoes on. Okay. We're not gonna lay here and wallow about bank wires.
So how do you like our audience loves to plan, and I know you do something called a life of guests for
Mhm.
planning for the year too. How do you make sure you have like joy in your year? Like you're going to Italy, right? Like how do you intentionally plan fun things into your business through like when you plan for the
Yeah.
year?
Well, that's a really good question, and planning is a huge part of my life because if my business is very schedule oriented, it's very I'm working with clients on a scheduled basis. I'm teaching classes on a scheduled basis. I'm doing events and retreats. And so if it's not on my schedule, it's not going to happen. And so something that I love to do, I talk a lot about finishing strong, finishing the end of the year strong means planning for the next year and making sure that in your plans it's not just your obligations, that it's also, if you're going to become a woman who is devoted to her own pleasure, who is devoted to creating conditions for thriving, what do you need? Right. And so I need sleep. I need movement. I need travel. And so, whatever your future self is off doing that you want to be doing, she's got conditions, okay, that are different than what you're tolerating today. So, I like to think about future me. What is she doing? And then, what does she need to have in place to make sure that that happens? And so, in Q4, at the end of every year, I like to plan the next year and I look at what are the moments that I want to make, the memories I want to make, what are the experiences I want to have, how do I want to feel? Has there been anything in this current year that I never want to experience again? What changes do I need to make and put in place? Is there help I need to hire, whether it's personal help with the home, with parenting, food, any of that, errand running, any of that stuff, or professional help, so that I'm making sure that I'm not at the end of the year going, wow, here we are at the holidays, and all I did was work and wine and want to veg because I was so exhausted from life.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that time because if you don't think about it, you don't realize, oh, I do need help there, or I need more sleep here. Like, I'm new mom, so I can say sleep is
Woo!
high on my to-do list. Maybe that will change next year.
I tell you what, I mean, all of y'all with young children or even teenagers, right? I remember I went from, when my children were little and then they were finally sleeping and I was getting pretty great sleep. And then the teenage years hit. And that's a whole nother thing because you're up
Yeah.
worried about them. If they're out, they're being loud. I'm an empty nester now. So I am getting lots of great sleep, so it does come.
I know.
But it happened because even when my kids were younger, because I prioritized understanding that about myself, that I'm pretty worthless if I'm not getting enough sleep.
Yes. And tell me about your career before you went into entrepreneurship too, because I know you have a big career change story that I think would be inspiring to our listeners too.
Yeah, so I've reinvented myself a few times. So in college and right out of college, I worked for a PR firm. Um, and I worked in marketing and promotions up until I had my son Ryan, who's now 24. My kids are 24 and 22. And I stayed at home with them for a little while. And then I re entered the workforce as a residential real estate agent. And, I was a commission only um, realtor. So while I was under a broker, I really was responsible for creating my own income and wealth. And I found that at first I was really happy to be out of the house and I enjoyed talking with adults and was good at it. However, and I enjoyed making money and I did real well real quick. However, many of your listeners may be in this boat. I started to realize I had on golden handcuffs where I knew it wasn't my real calling. Um, and it taught me a lot, but it did not fulfill me. And over time, over time, I noticed that I was really chained to this job. I was working too much. And there were a couple of moments. One moment was I had picked my little kids up from school. They were in the back of my giant Toyota Sequoia, refrigerator on wheels at the time. That would, I would haul the kids around and all my real estate signs. And I was like on my cell phone arguing with another real estate agent about a termite report. And I looked in the rearview mirror and my kids' eyes, they had like their little snack boxes and Capri Suns, and they're just looking at their mother lose her mind on the phone with this other agent. And I remember thinking like, this is not how I want them to remember me. and and there was another incident right after that where my mother came to visit for a holiday, and she made me promise that I wouldn't work while she was there. And I had some clients come into town from out of town that wanted to put in an offer on what was my biggest real estate sale of my career. And I went and I, on that holiday, and wrote that contract. And I came home, and my very Southern mother was like, "What has happened to you? Like, this is not my daughter, you know?"
Mm.
And she said, "I'll keep the kids for a couple of days. Why don't you just do something for yourself?" And the this was the pivotal moment, because in that moment, I couldn't think of anything other than grocery shop by myself or get caught up on the laundry.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, "Oh my god, she's right," because I have no life outside of being a mom or selling houses. And so it was in that moment that I just decided I needed to figure something else out, and I didn't know what. And that's really a scary place to be, where you're just kind of holding space. You have no idea what you're going to do next, but you know you've gotta. And I went down this path of consuming so much self help to just get through the day. But my life started getting better, and decided that I wanted to train to become a life coach, which at that in 2006, 2007, most people had not heard of that. They didn't know what that was. And I flew out to Arizona to train with Martha Beck, who wrote this book called Finding Your Own North Star. That book, I think, is one of the best self help books ever written. And that book is what changed my life.
Mm.
And when I went to that training, I mean, I wasn't even sure what I was going to do with it yet. But on the plane ride home, I wrote my business plan on the back of a Delta napkin. I was
Nice.
like, I am getting out of this career that I do not like anymore. And so I'm oversimplifying a little bit. I, put together a transition plan, and exited real estate. And it was scary because, my husband was just sort of like, "I don't understand how you think you're going to replace your real estate income with something no one's heard of, but I'm here for you." And thankfully it worked out.
I'm sure it did. And like, I told you I could do it.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of, well, I'll show you. So,
Hey, sometimes you need a little challenge.
yeah,
I'm all for challenges.
yeah.
So you ready for lightning round? Classy Career Girl lightning round.
Give it to me. Lay it on me.
Okay. What is your best financial advice?
Develop an investor's mindset, meaning, can you start to think about investing for long term wealth as opposed to spending for short term gain?
Mm. What would be your tips for someone who has a lot of debt right now?
Mm. The first thing I would do is, you need to get some money coaching or money therapy on where the debt, like, why do you have the debt? And then figure out how to consolidate it. But I'm somebody who would help you figure out how can you create something and sell it to pay that debt off, but you've got to figure out why you created the debt in the first place, and if there's like a money wound to heal.
Mm. What do you wish you would have known when you started on this road to career success?
I think I wish I would have known sooner that pleasure and joy trump strategy every time.
It's a good one.
Mhm.
What is your best mom advice?
Wow. I would say my best
We need
mom
it.
I know. My best mom advice is always advocate for your child. I think I spent too much time believing authority figures about my children instead of listening to my children.
How do you stay balanced?
Prioritizing joy, movement, um, spending more time with people in real life than I do with people online.
Mm. How do you find we said what brings you the most joy in your career or business?
Listen, my clients create miracles every day. Watching what my clients do when I reintroduce them to themselves. That is the best.
The wins, the success stories. I love it.
Yes.
It keeps you motivated, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
What does having class mean to you in your personal life or at work?
Being true to yourself.
How do you describe your work style?
Um, I'm pretty creative. I like to batch. And I stick to a schedule and I have boundaries around my schedule.
Okay, last one. You're so close. What's the most important skill to have in a business?
Uh, Mindset, growth mindset.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love the questions because everyone asks something different and I learn from you all. So where can people find out more about you, Susan?
So my website is susanhyatt.co, Hyatt. Also on social media, I'm at Susan Hyatt. And I have a podcast called You've Got Nerve.
Awesome. And your book, tell everyone where they can find your book
Oh,
too.
right. My book Bear is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, most major bookstores, but you can for sure find it on Amazon.
Awesome. So what is your final words of wisdom for someone who just is feeling stuck and needs that pep talk just like I did? What would you tell them?
Listen, here's my favorite lately. Even at the darkest hour, there's always another move. So just when you think the curtain's closing, there's always another move. There's always another miracle that can happen. And today is not over yet.
No, it's not. We still got time.
Mhm.
I love it. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here. This was great.
Thank you so much for having me.